This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willy Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. You already know the deal. How are you? How is everybody doing? I hope everybody out there had a good week. I had a good one. I was just locked in the studio trying to bang out some new music for everybody out there. You know, I've been a little quiet this year. I haven't put out as much music as I have in the previous years, and I know some people have been missing it. And look, in 2019, a lot of that is going to change. Working on a lot of fun stuff right now, just musically. But look, I'm not here to, give you a bunch of promo and just talk about what I'm doing. I'll save that until we actually start dropping this new music. Then I'll just be super annoying about it. But until then, what I'm here to do is introduce this episode. My guest on the show this week is Elephante. This one, man, this was a pleasure to do. I really enjoyed this one. And look, Elephante is just finishing up his tour for his Glass Mansion EP. He just put out the remix EP for that record. Really good. A lot of varied remixes on there. Kind of something for everybody. You definitely got to go check that out. Check him out on tour. All the music, all the tour dates, I'm going to link to everything in the description of this episode. And man, it was just a treat to talk to him. We had a blast. I'm going to tell you all about it in just a minute. But before I do, the end of the year is coming up. It's a time when I think everybody kind of takes a look back, reflects on what they've done over the past 12 months. And I just want to give a big shout out to everybody who's been listening to this show, tuning in every week. It really does blow my mind to look back at all the episodes we've done, all the support we've gotten from everybody out there. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all the support. I love seeing everybody's posts about the show. I say this a lot, but it really is the truth. People ask me what is the best way to support this show, and the truth of it is the best way to help us grow, the best way to support Back to Back is just by spreading the word. Word of mouth helps us a lot. That is the way we grow. This is a community-based show, so if you make a post, you make a tweet, whatever it is, retweet something I post up there, all of that really does help us grow. It helps us get, more guests, bigger names, more interesting people for you to listen to every week. And, it really is the community aspect of it that keeps me going. I love seeing everybody out there getting involved. So shout out to all of you guys. I was looking through some of the old episodes, and I think I might start highlighting a couple episodes every once in a while to go back and listen to, especially if you're a first-time listener or if you kind of tuned in, halfway through. If you scroll back in your feed, there's a lot of episodes. I've talked to a lot of people at this point. So this week, I'm just going to highlight a couple. The first one is episode number 36 with Dioro. Man, this was awesome. I met up with Dioro in Vegas. His whole family was there. We were in this big suite. Kids were running around. It was this super fun, chaotic atmosphere. And he's just got an amazing story. I think that episode with Dioro is great. Go check that one out. And another one of my favorites that I just randomly pulled out of a hat is episode 68 with Paul Oakenfold. Such a legend in the game. The things he's seen, nobody else I've talked to could speak to that. So much history there. So many legendary stories. The stories, man, in that one are just insane. So go check that one out with Paul Oakenfold as well. And don't forget, you can always reach out to me with any questions, comments, concerns you might have. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address, or you can hit me on all social media at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod. In the meantime, don't forget, you can also head over to Spotify and check out the Back to Bangers Spotify playlist. That's a list that I update every single week with brand new music from my guests, people I have on the show, myself, and just all the music that we mention in these conversations. Because I know we throw around a lot of song song names, a lot of artist names. Sometimes you don't always know who they are. I do my best to just throw all of those into the playlist so you can kind of use it as a reference while you're listening. The link to that is in the description of this episode, so go check it out, subscribe to the playlist. It's a lot of fun. And speaking of a lot of fun, man, I just had a great time with Elephante this week. I'll be honest, before I went over to meet up with him to record this, I just wasn't feeling it. I was tired. It had been a long week. You know, sometimes you just don't have the energy to talk to people. And pretty much from the second I got there, my whole mood changed. The energy was good off the bat. You know, even before we started rolling, we were talking about role-playing games and a bunch of nerdy shit that we both love. And it was just a good vibe from then on. He was great to talk to, super intelligent, super thoughtful. I loved what he had to say about the industry and creativity. There's a lot of gems in here. I'm really impressed by the way that he built his whole career, and I love the fact that he started off working with some big labels and has now kind of transitioned to doing it on his own. You can really tell he has a vision for his project, and I use that word a lot, vision, but it's the most inspiring thing to me to see somebody kind of have this whole world in their head that they're building. He's done a great job of bringing it to life, and you can tell that's sort of a big goal of his too. Don't forget to go grab the Glass Mansion EP, grab all the remixes that just came out, some really good ones. I played the Rocket Power remix on my SiriusXM show this week. The link to that and all of his tour dates. He's a great live act. You got to go check him out. All of that is in the description of this episode. All right, so let's get into this right now. This is a good one. Enjoy this. Me and Elephante back to back. Let's go.
When I do radio stuff, I've dropped an F-bomb on like college radio before, and they like panicked, and I was like, oh, might be.
Yeah. Somebody might be losing their internship over that one.
Yeah. I heard that FCC fines are like fucking wild.
Really?
Like, I think it's like $500,000 for
Jesus Christ.
Because they're really strict about it.
Man,
all those soccer moms, they can't have their little kids hearing.
I guess
hearing
not.
Language.
But in this day and age, man, it's like they're gonna hear it between Netflix and like I do a radio show on SiriusXM too, and you can swear and say everything there.
Yeah, they don't give a shit.
So it's like they're gonna hear it in every rental car they ever go in.
Yeah. Well, it's also fucked up because it depends on the radio show, or no, it depends on the artist. Because I always thought it was fucked up that Tove Lo with that song Habits could be like, I gotta stay high all the time. That was all good. But then when 3 6 Mafia had gotta stay high, they had to change it, gotta stay fly.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that might be some latent racism.
Oh, I think it's the most overt radio racism.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. I mean, it's so funny if you listen to like pretty much any popular rap song on the radio now. You hear one out of every like 6 words.
Oh yeah, like Rockstar, Post Malone. When I first heard the song, I was like, "The song's banging," but how are they gonna play it on the radio? Because literally no words, none of this is allowed.
Not a chance, man. I mean, I think maybe some artists at this point are just over the radio. Like, I don't know if it's as powerful as it was, 10 or 20 years ago.
Or they're just like, I can make a song with all swear words, and if it's hot, they're going to play it anyway.
Yeah, true.
Drake had that "fuck for free" song, and like that's literally like "fuck" is every third word.
Yeah,
so.
And that song is super hot too.
Yeah,
so of course it was everywhere.
So I think they just don't care.
Have you had a lot of those experiences as far because your music? I think there's a certain part of it that is a crossover appeal where it could get on pop radio or it could get on certain radio formats. So have you had those experiences, like doing whatever it is, the morning radio shows or the like radio festivals or any of that? Like, does that feel different, or do you approach it differently?
So I've had some success with the dance radio stuff. As far as not quite as much with the pop radio, that was a bigger sort of priority earlier in my career because it was at the point in the industry where everyone's like, gotta go pop, gotta go pop, gotta go pop.
I
Like,
remember
who's
that.
crossing over? Because, you know, the Chainsmokers had done it, and everyone was like, all right, I'm next, I'm next, I'm
Worked
next.
for them, yeah.
And like DJ Snake, and everyone was like, all right, what's that song? What, like, all right, how do we make a song that sounds like Lean On but isn't Lean On? And it's like, how do we make a song that's Roses but isn't Roses? And it just,
Yeah, that's a problem in general, man. Like so much of the copycat stuff.
and so early on, or early in my career, I was like, how do we get on the radio? And it really, I think it turned into kind of a dead end where it was, the music suffers. You can really tell when someone's trying to make their radio song.
Right.
And it is, now it's so cringy now. And so I think for the last year or two, I've been like, honestly, dude, just make the music you like. And if it's good and people feel it, you're going to do great. And
Right.
if it's not, then, I mean, it is such a different world to try to get onto pop radio. It's not even, it was also realizing it's not about the song. Like, you could have the biggest, like the best pop song ever, but if you're not in with the right people, if you're not with the right promoter, if you don't have the label behind you, if you don't have the money behind you, if you don't have the story, then none of that matters. So.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to Grand Theft on this show, and he had a radio record in Canada like a year or two ago.
Yeah, easy go.
Yeah, exactly. And a great song, and I think it did really well for him there, but he was talking about the process of actually getting it to radio and how much money he had to spend to hire a guy to pitch it to the station, you know.
Yeah,
so
it's
many
crazy,
steps,
man. And it's when you think about it, it's like, when you think about it in terms of when they're playing your song on pop, that's a song, that's 3 minutes that they're not playing of Post Malone or of
Right.
Drake or of
Taylor Swift or whatever.
6ix9ine or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like top 40 is really like top 17 right now. It's insane.
Did you try, like earlier on, was that something you were trying to break into before you sort of like figured out that shit is not fun?
I mean, it was kind of a pie in the sky goal. It was always from the lens of like, all right, we gotta get a big song on pop radio, and if it does really well, then we can think about it. But it never was really a good option. It was more of a, how much money do you want to light on fire?
Yeah.
And it was, you know, I haven't been in the radio game for that long, so it's each song now it's very like, I don't even check the charts. It just makes me crazy. It's just like, and you know, the last radio song that I had that ended up doing pretty well, it was like number 2 on BPM and like number whatever on top 5 on Mediabase or something. I made the song and I was talking to my manager and I was like, yeah, I think this is pretty good. And he's like, yeah, this is great. We're going to bring it to radio. I was like, really? Like, this doesn't really feel like a radio song. And he was like, yeah, well, we're doing it. And and you know, he really trusted his gut on it. And I was like, you know, let's see what happens. And it was a very pleasant surprise. And it was interesting because it felt really refreshing when I'd hear it on the radio.
Sure.
It was very different, which I think actually ended up
Yeah, man.
fit.
I mean, you know, certainly there's a lot of contrived music that does end up on the radio, but I think always the ones that stand out, just from a listener perspective, it's always the ones that have done something different or, like you said, sound like they shouldn't be on the radio.
Yeah, I think that's sort of been the guiding principle for the last couple of years of my career. Again, just to go back to when everyone was trying to be DJ Snake, everyone was trying to be the Chainsmokers. I think that was really bad for the creative side of it.
I would agree.
I think it took a lot of soul and a lot of individuality out of the dance scene. And it was like, I think it was getting pretty grim. And I think people have really started to turn back and be like, honestly, I don't care about that shit anymore.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, I think a lot of people have realized that was never really a formula for long-term success, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's just so clear now that once someone gets successful doing something, everyone rushes in trying to like fit in the door that open, but by the time that first artist makes it through, the door's already closed.
Yep.
It's like you look at, you know, just think about like Tropical House, right? Like Kygo got huge and then everyone started making Trop House.
Yeah.
All the house guys started making Trop House. All the deep house started making Trop House. And like now it's like no one else. It was a dead end. Same thing with like 100 BPM voice, like pitch vocal thing, DJ Snake thing.
Yeah,
it's
the
like,
twerk, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and all the ones that the artists have been successful have been the ones who have really been like stayed authentic and tried.
Man, I think it's like a confidence thing, and also, or maybe it is just a confidence thing, because I think, we're all, as DJs and producers, we're all trying to stay current, and we're trying to sort of make new, fresh, interesting sounds, figure out, what's the thing that hasn't been done yet, where can we push it to. But then, of course, I think as artists, most of us are also somewhat insecure, because it's always like, you don't know if people are going to like it. If you try something new, how is it going to be received? So then if you see somebody else getting success with a new sound, it's almost like this siren song of like, well, this is safe. You could try that,
100%. I don't think if you're really well adjusted, you're probably not going to be an artist. But yeah, I think that was, for me, that was definitely a part of it. Finally being confident enough to be like, all right, if I'm feeling it, if I'm inspired by this song, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
And that took a long time to get to, because for so many years it was like, this is the best thing I can ever do. And then you upload on SoundCloud and no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
And like I'm listening, like you listen back at like a year later, like, wow, that was trash.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was funny, man. I was doing this, or participating in this panel talk at Icon, the school out in LA, the production school. And one of the students there was asking a question about, he said, my first song that I'm really proud of, it's going to be my debut. And, how can I best like make sure that as many people hear it as possible? The classic thing. And I was like, man, I really don't know how to say this without sounding like a dick, but like probably not a lot of people are going to hear it.
I mean, I'm getting PTSD hearing about that. It's a weird almost contradiction where you have to have that mentality of being like, you put everything into it and you gotta like put your hopes and dreams and like your entire soul into the song. And then, but then also like once it doesn't do well, because inevitably it's not gonna do well, you have to be able to like pick yourself up. And so you, like when I was coming up, it was just like going back and forth between like irrational arrogance and like abject depression. Just like back and forth.
That sounds familiar.
So it's like, I think coming to terms with that was almost more of a survival thing, because I don't think I could be. I lived that way for a few years, and it's just so emotionally draining,
dude.
That
it's so stressful.
That just to cope, I think I was like, you gotta let go a little bit.
Yeah, man, you can't. What I figured out for me is that I can't get married to any one song or idea, or even just like hope of what it's gonna do, because any of those, like you said earlier with the radio hit that you had, which was somewhat unexpected, like that could happen at any time. But I think it's almost impossible to predict when it's going to happen,
Totally. And I got lucky in a way, because on my first EP, I had a song called Plans, which was the last song that was done. We had our radio single picked, so it was kind of like this song's for me. This is the album cut. I don't care if anyone ever hears it. I'm going to add a 90-second bridge with no drums, outro. Like I'm just gonna do me on that. Like we'll do it for fun. It was with Brandon Burnett, and that turned out to be like one of the biggest singles off the album or off the EP. And it was kind of like, all right, well, I have no idea what people are gonna like, so I'm just gonna make a bunch of music that inspires me, and hopefully like something will stick.
Right. Which is all we can really ever do, right?
And the song I made for this, like to be the single, that that one tanked.
Right.
So unless you're Calvin Harris, everything you make is just a
that
everything
must
you
be
make
nice.
is just a hit.
That must be really nice.
Yeah.
But even him, it's like, he's in a position now where he can spend so much money. I do think there's a certain amount of privilege that goes into like a product like a Calvin Harris. Not that he's not insanely talented. He's obviously talented to a high degree. But, if you look at like his last album, I mean, he must have spent $5 million on features alone,
Yeah, for sure. He definitely has an advantage there. But I also think that he has a supreme gift for making pop songs, like LeBron is supremely gifted at basketball. He's amazing at putting the ball in the net.
Yeah.
Calvin Harris just makes pop songs and they're amazing.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm not
even
taking anything away from him.
Yeah, even those, I would argue that, his funk wave album, like he kind of went out of the box. He did something no one else was doing. He didn't have to do that.
That's true.
So
yeah, and I do give him a lot of respect
with
for that.
With that said, he'd spend millions of dollars on it, which would be very nice. Like being able to get any artist in the world on the phone and on a record, like he like getting Frank Ocean on an EDM in quotes song is like wild.
Yeah, no, that is insane. Actually, now that you say that, doesn't make any sense.
So Frank Ocean doesn't work with anyone, and yet he
let alone like a DJ. Yeah,
exactly. So it is. Being rich doesn't hurt.
Yeah, no, never, almost in any situation. Well, I mean, what kind of we were talking about the early days and how like both of us would get in these cycles of like stress and anxiety and all that. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. It's like, for me, I think I used to be a less anxious person, like before the music industry. Like I think back to what I was like as a kid or even as a teenager, and I was a lot more carefree and just kind of oblivious, I think. Like what kind of kid were you growing up?
I think all kids are probably more carefree, right?
True,
it's like,
that's
I
fair.
think the minute you have to start paying rent is when that's where all the
a little more real. Yeah.
That's when all the anxiety comes. I don't know. I really I loved music growing up. I was classically trained in piano, and I taught myself guitar, and I was in bands and playing open mics and shit like that.
And were your parents kind of pushing that, supporting all that?
Yeah, they're like, this is a great hobby.
Right.
This will look great on your resume.
Yeah.
It's great to have extracurricular activities, and then when
to
you
show colleges,
and then when you go to med school, you'll have an outlet for whatever. And it's interesting because I do wonder what would have happened because when I was doing it growing up, it was all out of just like the pure enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
I never really conceived of the idea of being a musician or being let alone being a DJ. It was just like, I really like this, but being a musician, being a rock star, that's not a real job.
Yeah. And you were in Ann Arbor, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, there are a couple other people. Like, do you know Benzie?
Yep.
Benzie's out of Ann Arbor originally.
Yep.
But, that is to say, I don't think there's much of a, like I would imagine the dream of being a musician seems a lot less realistic in Ann Arbor than it does, say, if you're raised in LA or something,
Yeah, for sure. And, part of it was being Asian. Like having immigrant parents in general, I think is
high
like
expectations.
Yeah, and it's just like they come from a different world where it's like, you want to get a steady job and you want to do something respectable, and
were they first generation?
Yeah, they moved here from Taiwan in their 20s, and it's like, we didn't cross the ocean so that you could pick the most volatile, like risky,
right,
inconsistent source of income,
of course,
of them all.
Well, and it's like, parents, I think, usually can't even understand this kind of work because it didn't exist when they were kids,
Totally, but I think I kind of went at it from a like, look, I'm never gonna forgive myself if I don't try this. Give it a shot. And I took it very much a day, like one day at a time. Like, I'm just gonna figure this out.
So how did it evolve from, in high school, if you're playing music in a bunch of different formats, I assume in bands, classical, all that sort of thing. And then going into college, well, where did you go to college?
I went to Harvard.
That's what I thought. I remember that. And I also went to an Ivy League school. So I was like, oh, man.
Nice. Which one?
I went to Brown.
Nice.
Yeah.
The creative one.
It's, that's its reputation. But having had the experience now, and like I had friends at Harvard and other places, like Brown was honestly just kind of like the slacker Ivy, I feel like. Just because there were very few course requirements.
Yeah, I feel like I probably would have fit in pretty well there.
But you must have had good grades in high school, like to even get in at Harvard.
Yeah, I was a good student in high school. I played tennis as well, so that was a big thing.
Like fairly seriously.
I played on the team for 2 years in college, and then I basically quit to start doing music stuff. Where I was managing the studio there. I was interning at a studio in Boston, like working on music, writing songs, doing that
cool.
whole thing.
Were you going to a bunch of shows out there? I'm trying to think at the time, like, what was out there?
Yeah,
like out at the Middle East?
East and Cafe 939 and...
Was the Enormous Room still around then? It was like a little bar in Cambridge that had DJ nights.
I don't know. So it's weird. I actually didn't... I still wasn't going to like clubs or DJ shows really yet in college. It was... I was more into like the indie scene. I would go to like the Passion Pit show and like the Mike Snow show, and that was sort of my first entry into anything electronic. Really, I of course like I'd heard of like Tiesto and Armin and stuff, but that it didn't really move me until I was older.
Right.
And I think the first guy that was like that wowed me was like Skrillex, right? Because I was like, what is this even?
Yeah. I think a lot of people had that experience. Yeah.
And like Avicii, of course, where I was like, this is really fun. And yeah,
there's something about Avicii, man, that because he's another one that a lot of people like DJs and artists now will touch on as somebody they really connected with. And it's interesting because, I mean, obviously he was an amazing talent, made incredible music, but there's something about what he did that connected with people on such a deeper level. I don't know what that is. Yeah,
for me, it was this idea that, I had this stereotype, like unfairly, that dance music was pretty repetitive. It just felt like loops. Whereas for me, Avicii really turned it into like the arc of a song, right?
Yeah. It's like songs that could have been just written on a guitar. Right?
Yeah, it finally had that like, the melodic component was obviously there, but then it really had this sort of like movement where you felt like the song was like going through the structure of a song. It wasn't just like, here's this dope loop and we're gonna add one instrument every 8 bars for the next 6 minutes and take them away.
Shout out to techno.
Shout out Tech House. Yeah. Shout out Carl Cox. I like it more now. I definitely feel it, but it doesn't have my heart and soul the way that like other genres do. But like, if you've ever been to a Carl Cox show, when like,
oh man,
it's insane and so much fun, but like when he'll be playing something and then he'll have this like, it'll be like this big 32 bar build and then he'll add one hi-hat and everyone goes insane.
It's crazy. It's so fun.
It's like,
man.
yeah, it's so much fun, but
yeah. And it's a whole nother art form, man. And it's, I think you just got to connect with what you connect with. For me, it's like, I love tech house and techno, but I try to keep it, like I keep my distance so I can kind of just be like an ignorant fan of it in that same way. Mm-hmm. Like I'd love to go see Carl Cox do that, but I guarantee you like I wouldn't know the songs he was playing.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's another thing I've sort of appreciated as I've gotten older is that each sort of genre, it has its own place, right? Like you can't go into a Carl Cox show and expect to like, if you want to go headbang and you're going to a Carl Cox show, you're going to be disappointed, right? If you want to fist pump, like, or it's I've learned it's much more about just sort of the groove and kind of losing yourself and like not really, you're not really thinking about like, all right, what's this song like?
Yeah, it's kind of more of like an escape almost.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with deep house, and it's you as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate them for sort of their own sort of.
Yeah, man, I feel the same way, and it's, at the end of the day too, I think once you get into this industry, you meet the people making the music. We're all kind of doing similar stuff. We sit in front of our computers, we make a song, we put it out, we go on tour, and regardless of exactly what that sounds like, I think there is, like, I feel a sense of community more so now than I used to.
Totally, and just because dance music was it was born out of sort of like a rebel outcast kind of community, 100%. Right? And so I think because of
people
that,
forget about now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so mainstream, but like I see it every day at these, whenever I'm playing a show or like talk to fans, it's like, it is such it was a place for people to go where if they weren't accepted in their social life and their family or whatever, but then no matter what, you'd have this music in this community that was always so accepting. Now it's 28, everyone's kumbaya, happy, like happy family, but it's always been that place for people to be like, let your freak flag fly. You can be who you want to be.
Absolutely. And I think those are the people who will stick around,
Totally.
Like, we've had a lot of, I guess you would call them like tourists in the dance music scene in the last 5 years or so. And, who knows how long they'll stick around. But I think you're right that it's really the people who are there for the right reasons who will stick it out.
Yeah, you see the people who have been to EDC for the last 15 years, right? They're like, every year we go and we go with our crew and we go and meet new people, and we might not know the new artists, but you know what? We're there for the community, and that is such an incredible thing.
Yeah.
And of course you're gonna have the people that go there a couple years and they roll balls and then they go on with their lives. But I think having that sort of underlying deep culture to it is such a magical thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Have you found it hard? Because sometimes for me, like, I have to sort of step out of myself and remind myself why I'm there and why I'm doing it, because for sure, that's the reason I got into it. Like, I felt like a weirdo as a kid. I was going to raves, in my late teens and just kind of not knowing anything, but really that community, feeling accepted, exactly what you said. But now that this has become, work and a daily grind, and like you said earlier, we're paying our rent off of it, it's sort of hard to still feel that way all the time. Like, I don't know. How do you like replenish your energy and your excitement for doing this?
For me, it's really about the fans. It's going out and I try to, whenever I play, look out in the crowd and really try to engage on like an individual level. And that's, especially when I'm playing my own music, that's sort of the magic part, like looking out and seeing someone scream like the lyrics of one of my songs.
Yeah. That's addictive for sure.
That's the 8-year-old Tim's fantasy, right? And I think that's sort of that's the magic to it, and it's knowing that the music I create has had an impact on someone.
Yeah, man.
And frankly, I came at it from the producer side. Like, I didn't know how to DJ until 5 years ago. I learned how to DJ to be able to play my music.
Yep, absolutely.
So for me, it always comes down to seeing how the music I'm playing and I'm making is like affecting people, and just constantly reminding myself, it's like, dude, this is what it's all about, and don't never take this for granted, because it really is the most special connection.
It is, man. Yeah, I agree. There's something about that connection that keeps me coming back to. And it's not only energizing and, makes me feel good that I could affect somebody else's life, but it reflects back on me too. Like, it makes me feel better.
Totally. It's a very sort of inspiring circle of energy. It's like, having people be like, I played this song at my wedding. It's like, wow.
Yeah, that's insane.
Wow.
I mean, when you were, starting off like high school into college, where did the thought that you would even want to be a performer start, like in any aspect?
I think I was like subconsciously working through it because, again, I never thought it was possible. I was just like, I want to do, like, this is fun. And like, I think the first performances I had besides like my piano recitals were like doing these open mics where I'd like drag my friends out to the bar or whatever. And there's something about it where it was, to me, it was always a means to an end in terms of, well, I want people to hear my music, and for people to hear the music that I've written and made, I have to play it live. So, all right, how are we going to play it live? It was just the kind of thing where I just wanted to get better at it, and I never really considered myself a natural performer, but it was one of those things where, each time you do it, you're getting a reaction that you didn't get before. There's one moment where you like kind of see like the whoa, like wow kind of moment, and you feed off that, and you're like, okay. And then I think it's, so it was never like a conscious decision. It was more just like how do I get better at this thing that is very fulfilling to me.
So in college, you were saying you were in sort of the indie scene, loving all those bands, going to see them. And what kind of flicked the light switch on as far as electronic music and production? You mentioned Skrillex earlier, but
yeah, I mean, it was like the early EDM wave in the States, which then like led me backwards and kind of let me overcome some of the stereotypes that I had about it before, and then
and I mean, it was crossing over with the indie scene a lot back then too. Mm-hmm. Like some of those,
like the 8-track remix of Heads Will Roll, and there's like, so I think the thing that really cemented it for me was I went to Coachella for the first music festival, and I was seeing Cascade, who I'd liked, and now I knew some of his music, like some of his singles and stuff, and I saw him, and like it completely changed my life to where it was like, this is everything. Like, this is what I want to do. It was kind of a transformative moment where it was like, this is more, because I still had a little bit of that, snobby indie band guy, like, oh, they're just pressing buttons, like that dickhead. Like that was me.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a transformative moment where I was finally like, no, this is like something more than that. This is such a unique, like almost spiritual experience.
Yeah.
That is it's not just, it's gone beyond just like the, sort of mechanical.
Yeah, of course. Well, Cascade is another good one as far as song structure, and you can really tell. I mean, I've talked to him about it. He always says like, yeah, it's all about the song and the melody and the lyrics before any of the rest of it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the approach I take with it, and so that I really connected with that aspect too. So is that, sort of the movement of the songs and the beautiful lyrics and like the emotional component, and then it also like banged, and it was so much. The energy was so incredible that it was like, this is like one of the most important like musical experiences I've had. And
did you have any experience with electronic production at that point?
I think I dabbled at that point. I think I had like the demo of Ableton.
Sure, maybe. Yeah.
And I had tried doing stuff in Pro Tools, which if you're a producer out there, don't use Pro Tools to produce.
So I got a degree in music at Brown, and it was all very Pro Tools based. Yeah. When it was even working with software at all. But yeah, it was not helpful. It was not what I wanted it to be.
Yeah, because I worked at the recording studio and sort of cut my teeth engineering in Pro Tools, but then when it came to production, it was so difficult and didn't make sense.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if you did this, but I was trying to make dance music in Pro Tools for like a year or more, and it was the most painful.
I don't think I lasted a year. I think I did it for like a few months, and then I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
And then you come to find out that literally everything is better.
Yeah, and then I downloaded Ableton, and I was like, wow, everything is where it should be. This is so great.
And did you right off the bat, still in college, like start writing or, what would become Elephante ideas or those types of songs?
Yeah, I again, sort of the arrogance of youth where I was like, I'll just figure this out. This won't take forever.
Yeah.
You just throw a kick 4 on the floor and put a snare drum and it'll be great.
Well, because that's kind of the band mentality too, right?
Yeah.
It's like you just make it work.
Yeah, you just throw it on there and whatever, it'll be fine. Like let someone else mix it. I think I started off doing like a couple original songs. I sent it to a couple friends and they were very nice, but then they're like, yeah, this is like they were more familiar with dance and they're like, yeah, man, you gotta. This ain't it, chief. And so I was like, yeah, just kind of went along and tried to do more. And I think sort of the melodic and sort of song structure aspect of it I had a pretty strong grasp on, and that was that's always been easier for me. And then but then in terms of sound design and mixing and all the sort of more technical aspects, that took me, much longer to even get a grasp on. And
did you have any kind of mentor or anybody to show you the way a little bit?
Mr. YouTube.
Yep. A good friend of mine too.
Good friend, Dr. Google.
A very wise doctor, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, by that time I had moved out to LA and I had never lived in LA. I was living with my brother, but neither of us had lived there, and I didn't know anyone. So I really was kind of on an island, and it was just me sitting on my laptop, like watching YouTube, just trying to figure it out. And like,
did you move out there with the intention to make music your career?
Yeah, I had a job offer that I sort of pushed back as far as I could, and I had a few months to try to make it in the music industry in 3 months when you're 21 and don't know anyone. Yeah, when you're young, you're really fucking dumb.
Yeah, oh man.
But it was I spent that time learning and working, and I think subconsciously I wanted to move out there because it's like, oh, you move out to LA, that's the city of dreams.
Of course.
And, you don't know how hard it's going to be or how far you have to go, but yeah, and it was I was working. And like all my weekends and nights, I was like on Ableton, like trying to figure it out, trying to learn.
Was the job in LA as well?
Yeah.
So you could at least kind of like get a taste of the scene and see it happening.
It was based in LA, but I was actually traveling a lot. I was a consultant, so Monday through Thursday, I was like flying off to some place, and
young business traveler.
Yeah, it was the worst. And it was. I gave it my best shot for a few months and was like, dude, this is not it. And so I was my object while I was working there became, how do I get out of work as early as possible so I can go back to the hotel room and work on music. I think I actually installed Ableton on my work computer.
Oh wow!
So that was pretty.
Are these
pretty
like
bold.
Before the days when your employer would know everything you were doing on your computer?
Honestly, they might have known. Who knows?
Sure. Well, I took the only like office job that I had out of college. I think it's probably okay at this point for me to say it, but they gave me like a work laptop, and then once I left the company, I just kept the laptop, and like I was DJing off of that for years afterwards.
Well, I gave back my computer, but I uninstalled Ableton before I gave it back.
That's probably good.
So yeah, there was just it was just a lot of like self learning and a lot of watching YouTube, and I didn't know anyone in the industry, so I think it took longer than if I had a mentor. Like I wish that sometimes I could go back and tell myself then what I know now.
Sure.
But I think also in sort of doing it that way, I think I do a lot of things like wrong.
Yeah.
But
that's usually those are the people who succeed, I think, man.
yeah, I think it kind of comes out in a unique way because I've like figured out my own like janky way to like do things.
Sure,
so.
like make this kind of sound or make a drum sound this way.
Yeah, and it's like when whenever I'm with other producers, it's like I'm like I don't even know how to explain, but like this is sort of what this is the weird thing that I figured out how to do. And
I always I get self-conscious working in the studio with other people a lot of the time if I feel like they have a more solid foundation of knowledge than I do, because sonically I know my stuff can stand up, but then I always feel like an idiot trying to like explain it.
Oh, dude. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Especially like the Wizards of Ableton.
Right.
There's like some things that I do that have been like are so inefficient. They're like, bro, there's a shortcut for that. Or like, dude, like all you have to do is change this one setting here. And I'm like, oh. This literally would have saved me like years off my life.
And so did you eventually quit the job? Like how did that transition into, full-time music happen?
Yeah, so then I was just working on music on the side, and it got to a certain point where I was like spending more time working on music than actually working for the job.
Yeah, and it just sounds like your heart wasn't in it kind of pretty early on.
Yeah, it was a interesting time because looking back, it wasn't even like a decision. It was just like this is the only choice. Where again, I'm never gonna forgive myself if I don't give this a shot.
Yeah,
and I don't know. A lot of it was just overcoming the courage or overcoming the fear of not having a job and like quitting.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I'm sure parental pressure too.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that was a popular decision with the parents.
Yeah, that took some easing into. And just because for the entirety of my life prior to that, I had sort of done what was expected. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you do. You go to college, you get a job, you do X, Y, Z, and you do this, and then this is the next step in your life. And to finally be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right. Well, and, at a certain point, I think you have to. Like, I relate to that very strongly. I felt kind of the same way. And, at a certain point, it's like, well, you went to the good college, you got the good job, and still you felt like something was missing. So
yeah, and it's kind of scary. There's a lot of, like, almost there's guilt to it, where it's like, is there something broken inside me?
Sure.
Where, like, why don't I appreciate all the privilege that I have? And it was... that was a really sort of scary thing with all my friends from school. They had great jobs, and like, it's like, what's wrong with me?
Right. Yeah, it's weird to compare yourself to your friends who kind of went into, for lack of a better term, like the normal world, and just got like a good solid job and.
Like all my friends from high school, they're like lawyers and they're like buying houses and like getting married, and it's that. Like, dude, I'm flying to Alabama tomorrow for a show. It's really, I don't really.
You're like, I was up till 6 in the morning. Now I'm in Alabama.
Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, it was. It was one of those things where, in hindsight, it felt very. Quitting my job felt very bold and pretty premature, but again, it's one of those things where I think you have to be pretty young and dumb and arrogant to think that you can pull it off.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it wasn't even necessarily arrogance, but it was what you said earlier. Yeah. I just didn't really feel like there was a choice, you know? And that is, I guess, more ignorance and just like obliviousness to, the realities of life. But that was what it was. I felt the same.
But that's the thing. I imagine if you told yourself back then all the things that would have to go right for you to be where you are right now.
Yeah.
You would probably be like, there's no fucking way.
Oh, yeah, no, it's impossible.
And same thing with me. If you had told me like all of these things need to happen and you will still not have a career, like a year later, I'd be like, there's no fucking way.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a very unrealistic goal.
So you really need to have that sort of like ignorance of like, well, I don't care what it takes. I'm just going to figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree, man. And so, I mean, what did happen? What was sort of the sequence of events once you leave the job? I assume you're just working on music all the time, sort of trying to figure out how to get it out there, how to involve yourself in the scene. Mm-hmm. What did that look like?
Yeah, it was just a lot of working on music, trying to like hustle up. Like my best friend from college was briefly my manager, and he was like going around New York, like begging promoters to let me open.
Yep.
Because that's what we thought you had to do.
Were you in New York at the time?
No, I was in LA, which is even more fucking ridiculous, where it'd be like, yo, I got you a show at Avenue, and I'd be like, all right, I'm there, and pay $500 for a fucking plane ticket for a $0 gig. And I was like, this seems like bad business, but
yeah, I've been there, man.
I started doing a lot of remixes, and I linked up with my current manager, and we sort of were just like, dude, we're gonna put you. You just need to release a lot of music, and we're going to build you up through the blog scene. So every 3 weeks I was doing some sort of remix, and then like emailing every blog, trying to get on Hype Machine, do that whole thing.
Yep.
And so every three weeks for like 2 years, I was putting out a remix.
For 2 years?
Yeah.
That's a crazy pace, man.
Yeah.
To keep that up for 2 years.
I think from when I quit my job through over the next, I don't know, like 18 months, I probably put out like 40 remixes or something.
Damn. And was it all remixes? Did you do any originals in there?
I can't. I think I might have tried sneaking in an original or two, but it wasn't like anything super. I wasn't ready to make the originals.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way.
I feel you.
It was good for me to try, but I wasn't ready.
Yeah. Well, and making remixes is such a great way to learn in general, I think.
Yeah, and I was really lucky because I was coming up in sort of the Wild West of SoundCloud days where anyone could just put up a remix and it was fine. It was all good.
Yep. Yeah, no one was monitoring anything.
No one had any idea what was going on. It was like it was good, and I think it was a lot of the artists are doing really well right now. I think we all kind of came up in that generation and like cut our teeth doing that. Like, let's just find what acapellas can we find online and just put it up.
Right.
And it gives you exposure, but also like gets your chops working with like good vocals and
yeah, and you understand kind of, you can see the way somebody else put the song together, and then you can sort of figure out, well, do I have anything worthwhile to add to this?
Exactly.
For me, it gave me an understanding of kind of, structures that other people use, and just understanding kind of the way a song would be presented. Because when I started off, I had all these ideas, but I had no idea how to put them together in a way that would be comprehensible for anybody.
Totally, and just working with a good vocal, right? Understanding like, how does this vocal fit into whatever rhythm or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's like it's a great constraint. Like, it's a good sandbox to be like, no, you have to make this part sound good.
Exactly, right? Because when you're writing your own song, it's like the options are almost like they're almost too many, right?
Yeah,
you have the whole universe at your disposal. So being able to be like, no, this is your anchor. This is what you're working with. What you got?
Yeah. I bring this up a lot whenever this topic comes up. I just like to ask people, you were saying you came up in the SoundCloud era, the sort of Wild West SoundCloud, which is more or less done with now. And R.I.P., man. Good times. But now, I sort of wonder how a new artist today would get on, you know what I mean? With the Spotify sort of framework being the dominant paradigm, it's like, I don't know exactly what it is. And I don't expect you to have the answer either, but I like talking about it just because it's sort of interesting to think about what comes next.
Yo, man, I think about this pretty often, and I have no fucking idea. When up and coming, like when kids ask me like, what do I do now? It's like, honestly, dude, I have no idea.
Yeah.
You certainly can't do it the way I did it anymore. but like I think it's such a shame that like creatively for all these young artists is like they don't have this resource that was such a formative part of my career, and like my artistry was like learning how to do this. And then like on top of that, not just the music side, it's like you learn how to market yourself, you learn how to build yourself up, and it's almost like it's kind of like the minor leagues, right? Where it's you're developing your skills and you're building your I hate saying this word, but you're building your brand as an artist, and you're like learning what the fuck's going on and like who you want to be and how you want to present yourself. And it's a really great place to incubate sort of your whole creative project. Now it's like I think you have to do a lot more of that. Like before you could kind of just put stuff out and learn it on the fly.
Yep.
Which was great because then you get feedback, you're building while you do it. Whereas I think now, I think you have to spend more time before you even get started. I would say it's
sort of building in the dark.
Yeah, totally. And I think you have to like almost go away and before you have to like figure out, like I kind of figured out who Elephante was as I was putting stuff out. I think you almost have to figure it out before and almost like and then have a big coming out to the party where you appear as a fully formed artist, which is so fucking difficult.
It's so the hardest thing to do.
And
man.
For that to, I mean, for someone who's not in the industry to be able to do that is like, I think is incredibly difficult. But I would say you probably have to find someone who believes in you, like a manager. And I mean, at this point, I think you probably need, it's almost going back to the days of before the SoundCloud era where you needed like a big artist cosign.
Yeah,
right?
I think the cosign helps a lot. I think too, like I've been talking to a bunch of younger producers, like super young, 16, 18 years old, and asking them kind of what they're up to. And what I've been hearing a lot of too is that it's kind of more about the local scenes again, and they're all kind of just working with their friends and they're on like a Discord server or, something like that. And just all talking sort of out of the public eye, but still building that community.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
I hope that that's accurate and that's actually happening because it's like, obviously those things aren't public. Like we can't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that shit is super dope. This isn't dance, but like what Brockhampton's doing where they're just like creating a community and they're just doing sort of you don't have to be a collective, but I think because I kind of came up relatively isolated geographically where, sort of my creative peers were like on SoundCloud across the internet. Whereas if you can kind of replicate that experience in your local and work with other people that inspire you. And, I think that's actually an interesting, cool way to go about it.
Yeah, man. Here's hoping. I mean, I feel good that the kids will figure it out,
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah, that's the thing. But God knows if...
I think it goes in waves, right? Where it's basically... the system kind of figures out what's going on. Right. They lock it in. Then the kids figure out a way to break it.
Yep.
Then it's chaos for a few years. Then the system like adjusts. They lock it down again. It's like, they broke it with Napster.
Yep.
Then they figured it out with iTunes, and they broke it again with SoundCloud, and now they've like sort of figured it out with Spotify, and something's going to come out that's going to break it again.
You're absolutely, yeah, I love thinking about that, man. That's spot on. Well, how did it evolve for you? So you're posting for years on SoundCloud, you're sort of just building the following, all of that. Did your team kind of just materialize naturally over time? Like you said, your friend was managing you for a while, but I'm curious about like when kind of the next like quote unquote legit step happened.
So pretty soon after that, he had a full-time job. So he gracefully bowed out, and I'm very thankful for him. But then I had another friend from college who had done some like tour production stuff and was writing for a blog. And so then we got together, and he started working full-time with me. And so we were together during the whole remix thing. And then I had a couple remixes finally start to do pretty well, like hit a few million hits on SoundCloud and start doing well in like the college world. So then I signed with CAA, my agent, and they started getting me like college shows and stuff, which was great because I had no money.
Yep,
and that was kind of the first lifeline. And it was I kind of hit a wall with the remix thing where we put out stuff and it'd do well, but it didn't really feel like we were like growing anymore.
Sure.
So I think it was at that point where we're like, we need to like brand. We have to outgrow the whole SoundCloud remix guy thing.
Sure.
Because that's a great place to start, but at the end of the day, there's so many of those.
More every day, yeah. And so how did that transition from, remix guy to original artist come about? Was that a hard transition to make?
Yeah, I think it was just like start thinking about your original music, and we started working with some songwriters, and it was something that I had wanted to do, but since my sort of earlier forays had been met with basically apathy, like we talked about earlier, like you make some original shit, no one gives a fuck. I think I finally started to kind of know what I was doing, and I put out a song called Age of Innocence, which was the first song that really kind of did well for me. And I was so, I can't even remember how this happened, but we got on the radio, we got on to BPM, and we were doing some shows then. And that was the first time, I think a few months after that happened, I was playing a show in Dallas, and I heard people like singing the lyrics to it.
Man.
That was sort of the first moment that really felt real. And I think that was, I want to say early 2015.
Right.
2016.
2016. And was that song, because you put out like a album basically, or like an EP, whatever you want to call it, right around that time as well, right?
Yep. So I had finished that at the end of 2015, and at that time I was working on my first EP, I Am the Elephante, and we were, and I think I finished that in, I want to say June or July, and put it out in September, and that was the first thing that I think really sort of, leveled me up.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
to bring it back to the nerd.
100%. Yeah.
Because there are a few songs on it that did really well. And again, we sort of learned that it takes a while for music to kind of permeate and like get in people's heads, and sort of, so we put that out in the fall, and we had some early success with Spotify and stuff. This was before the whole madness, where like before the labels like converge on it and like start picking it apart and like taking their fiefdoms, and and then that we had a couple songs on that do really well, and then went on tour in the fall and spring to support that, and that's when I think things started to really build, because finally at that point I think I'd put out like 11 original songs, right?
Added to the 40 remixes,
for the remixes, and I think that's when things started like finally click, and I think, and then from there, I worked on this new EP, which I put out in June.
And that's Glass Mansion?
That's Glass Mansion. And I think the really sort of incredible thing about the first EP that I did was that it's still growing, which to me, to like 2016 me, was like a fucking wild idea. Right. Like, you'd be like, no way. And like, if you told me in 2 years that it's gonna be bigger than it is, like, not when I first released it, I'd be like, you're fucking insane. Because I came up in the SoundCloud world where it's like people have 3-week attention spans. It's like you put it out, it's big for 3 weeks, and it falls off a cliff and no one cares anymore. So I was like, okay, hopefully it'll last a little longer than that. But to see just sort of how much those songs have grown since.
Sure. And maybe that's, to bring it back to something we were talking about earlier too, we talked about the songs you put out that you care so much about and that just kind of tank. But sometimes you don't know when they're going to come around,
Totally.
Like you even think about like the classic one that everyone talks about is like Harlem Shake from Bauer. He put that out like a year or more before it became the Harlem Shake, Yeah,
I mean the biggest song, we had this is back when I can't remember if it was still New Music Tuesday or New Music Friday, but that was sort of like we kept trying, that was a big thing for us, and we put out this song Catching On, which we had a couple other songs in New Music Friday or Tuesday or whatever, and Catching On, which I loved, and it was like the first like non-progressive house song that I put out. And I was like, this is like, I think this is gonna be a really special song. And we put it out, and again, no one gave a shit. But then sort of over time, it just kind of like picked up and like things started sort of happening. And then now it's like getting more plays a day than it did when we released it 2 years ago.
Wow.
Like on release day, like it had the worst release day of any of the singles on the EP. And now it's like by far the biggest song. So it's just weird how it happens.
It's
and
interesting, man. Well, and you've done a bunch of stuff sort of unconventionally. Like I was reading before I knew I was going to come talk to you, both those EPs you self-released, which I wouldn't have guessed had I not read that. Was there sort of and I mean, obviously you came up in the SoundCloud era, so you're used to the self-releasing idea. Was that like a conscious thing to, not go the label route for these big releases?
Yeah, absolutely. We had tried working with some labels before, and to not great success.
Yeah. It's a mixed bag every time.
It's a mixed bag. And I had some friends who had signed, and, early on that was like a big, it was a big status thing. It's like, oh, I'm like, who are you signing with? Like, I'm with Big Beat. I'm with Republic.
Right.
Like, but I think for better or worse, I was never really that plugged into the whole, the business industry side of it. Like I fucking hate networking and like going out to and like trying to meet people and like I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
And luckily I have a very, very smart team, and they have similar feelings, and they were like, you know what? We've built this infrastructure from the blog game, from like we've built all this up, everything that even on the songs with the that we end up doing with the label, we felt like we were doing most of the legwork, and it's like, what are they really doing that that we can't do ourselves?
Sure.
And so we were like, you know what, fuck it, let's like, we want to put it out now. We want to make sure it gets out this year, because if we shop it, it's going to take forever. And like, we're like, we're going to put this out this year. If it bombs, whatever, like we'll make another one. It'll be fine. And so it was like, we just did it. And again, I have an amazing, very, very smart team that was able to sort of figure it all out. And
yeah, well, because, so much of your music, I mean, you work with a lot of vocalists and you seem like a collaborative kind of guy. And that's one thing that record labels are supposed to be good at, right? Is sourcing vocalists and writers and all that. How have you been able to kind of navigate that just on your own? Is that kind of just relationships you've been able to build over time?
Yeah, just relationships that my team has built, and there have been a lot of there have been some people in the industry that have taken a great liking to us for God knows why, but I'm very thankful. And it was one of those things where I was working with, I had more than enough people to work with that, like I was the slowest part of the process.
Sure.
Like we had enough like vocalists and writers and like cool people that we wanted to work with. Like I was slowing, like I couldn't get through it fast enough. And so it was like, we weren't short on the other stuff. And, we were like, what? A label's not going to give us Rihanna, so
right.
and we had talked to friends who had tried that, and they're like, yeah, they had this song, and they thought they had someone, but then they passed, and then they had to wait another, and then this one wanted to change the lyrics, and then like this one didn't like their cut, and then like at the end of the day, it's a year later, and like at that point, they're like, we're not having a release.
Man, I love that, hearing that, because that's, doing it yourself at any level of the game, I think is always going to be the most satisfying way, even if it's the hardest way.
Yeah, and I mean, there are definitely growing pains about it, but now it's very much like my greatest fear was not being able to release music. And I had heard that from some of my friends and other labels where they're like, well, the first single didn't do very well. Like, now we got to wait 6 months for their schedule to free up. Whereas for us, it was like, oh, this one didn't work. Like, fire up the next one. We got it ready.
Yeah. Well, it seems like for you, you've never suffered from a lack of productivity, it sounds like.
I mean, I
don't
think
know if that's what it feels like, but
it definitely doesn't feel like that. It feels like I am like wading through a river of peanut butter working on this music, but then somehow like a year later I look back and it's like, wow, we actually got some music done this year.
Sure.
If I can get one song done a month, that feels pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a great goal, man.
That feels pretty good.
I think that's a great goal for anybody.
But I don't always get there.
Well, now you're on tour all the time, and
yeah, I've learned to be more efficient with it. So it's,
can you work on the road?
I was never able to before, but this last tour I actually started to a little bit. I think it's because I stopped drinking on tour.
Ah, there's a key for all you young listeners out there.
Yeah, I was, believe it or not, drinking like 8 beers at every show will make you feel not so good the next day.
Somehow you do that for 30 days in a row.
Yeah. Somehow. And so it's like it's a cycle. You feel better the next morning, so then you go in, and then when you get to the hotel, you're like, oh, I have a few hours where I don't feel like absolute shit.
Yeah,
like maybe I'll try. I don't think I'll ever be able to mix or do really heavy lifting stuff.
Yeah.
It's more writing and conceptual stuff, but it's been a very weird feeling on this tour because for the first 3 years of my touring career, I like couldn't do shit on the road.
Sure,
besides like make like edits for the show that night.
Of course. But I mean, that's cool, man. I think it's good to always be evolving and kind of tweaking your process. Even the drinking thing, like, I mean, I'm not sober. I'll have a drink or maybe 2 at a show, but it's very minimal. It's way less than it used to be. Mm-hmm. And it was, for me, after a while, I mean, I of course noticed that not being hungover was nice and that I was more productive. But after a while, I would go to the shows and be like, I'm not even sure that I like doing this in the moment, you know? Like, I think I was just doing it for a long time just because it was free and people want to party with you.
Just out of sheer habit.
Yeah, and it's what's expected.
You don't want to disappoint people.
Right, yeah. You want to be that friendly presence, the guy people remember and had a good time with.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It finally just got to the point where like, I was like, holy shit, I've been touring for 4 years now. And that's a lot of drinks.
Yeah. And it takes a toll. I mean, cumulatively, it builds up. At least it did for me.
Yeah, and it was, again, I think it came back to I had more ideas in my head than I had time to put down.
Sure.
And so it was like, I think I'm more excited about going back to my room and working on music than I am about like getting fucked up tonight.
Amen, man.
So it's at a certain point that balance just kind of flipped.
Do you have a vision for where you want to take the project, go in the future, like either short term or long term? Is it more just kind of like continuing to build like one brick after the other? Or, do you have sort of wild ideas for what it could be down the line?
I'm definitely a one brick at a time kind of guy, but I will say on this last tour, on the Glass Mansion tour, we finally started putting together some stage production. Yeah. And that was, we did 5 shows with our new stage production, and it was like, it was like the most fulfilling thing.
Oh, that's so cool.
that I've done. It was I was playing a different set, and we were trying to incorporate, like we were working with a visual artist all year to put together custom visuals for the whole thing. And we like for our LA and San Francisco shows, we had worked with a dancer to choreograph for a few of the songs, had them come out, and just like trying to turn it into more of a experience, right? Like we're always building towards that Cascade Coachella, so we're always building
Right.
towards the Porter World set.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to, it's the music's obviously is the foundation. We're trying to like make the live experience more and more.
Sure, you want to make like a whole world people can inhabit,
Absolutely. And so one of the things I'm proudest of that we did this year is we worked with this amazing 3D artist to make this 10-minute animated 3D film, and it's based on the music. It's set to this 10-minute EP mix I made of the Glass Mansion EP, and it's like the concept is you're exploring the Glass Mansion. So you're like walking up to the house, and you're going through, and each song has its own specific room with its own sort of vibe, and you're like actually taking a tour.
That's
so we're calling it the Glass Mansion Open House, and it's I think it's so dope. I think it's coming out. It's coming out very soon, but it's like just stuff like that, right? Where I came up with this concept of the Glass Mansion. Then we're like, how do we take this further? How do we make this more than just an EP on Spotify? How do we, make it real? Where can we go with this? And so it's just like constantly pushing sort of the creative ideas on it. It's funny, like this guy Kagan that we're working with is he's brilliant. He's insane. But he like built a 3D model of the mansion based on the artwork. It's literally like a 3D render. And I was joking like, yo, we should 3D print these.
Right.
And then at our last show, he actually 3D printed them, and so now I have a model of this house that we worked with an artist to develop, and now it's like,
That's so sick, man. You could like start, you can make your own toy line.
Yeah, and so it's just like, I was like, maybe we should just like get some keychains or something, but like, it's just stuff like that where we're constantly, I'm thinking about the next music, but it's also how do we make it into so it's more than just the songs.
Right.
It's like, how do we create this whole universe around it?
That's so cool, man. And, obviously the EP is out, you're on tour right now. Is there anything else coming down the pipeline people should be looking out for?
Yeah, I'm almost done with the tour, which is pretty sad because it always happens this way where you're right when you figure out what you're doing, then it's over.
When it gets good.
Yeah. But I'll have some time off tour. I'm actually working on a side project right now with a buddy of mine. It's a duo, and it's like this kind of weird, almost ambient it's not really dancey.
But, I like that. I like it already.
The working vibe is Lana Del Rey meets Flume meets Death Cab.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of back to the indie roots a little bit.
Yeah, it's cool because it's cool working with my friend. The writing, the whole creative process is very different. The vibe's going to be different. It's called Diplomacy. So it's going to be, I'm finishing up an EP on that. We have 5 songs written, and I'm just going to, once I'm done with tour, I'm going to hit the studio and produce those out. And we'll see. It's like, it's one of those fun things where it's like, this could amount to nothing, but it's really fun, and maybe something will work, maybe it won't.
100%, man. And it's awesome that you can keep it fresh for yourself too,
Totally. It's been such an awesome like creative outlet is maybe the wrong word because everything is a creative outlet, but it's such a like, it makes all the Elephante stuff feel so much fresher again, and like evaluate like what about it
Of course. And I'm
really
sure
important,
once you
so.
eventually go back and work on more Elephante stuff, you'll be refreshed. You'll have new ideas, new creativity.
So I think the one thing that I've learned, the most important lesson I've learned being an artist in the last few years is whatever you're doing, at least for me, I have to have at least a little element of I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing.
Yes.
There has to be that like the sense of exploration, like figuring stuff out and excitement when something finally clicks. Because if you're just doing what you already know, you're just following a formula, and that's when everything's just sterile and when it's uninspired, and people can tell.
Yeah.
And it's like the times where it's like the best music I've made, the stuff that's most impactful. It's like, I have no idea how I did that. And going into making this song, I would have had no idea what was going to come out.
Yeah, 100%, man. I mean, I'm not a spiritual person in any way, but it's those kind of moments that get me the closest to feeling spiritual, where it's like, I really don't know how I did that. Like, that was just a moment, and I don't think I could recreate it. Those moments are amazing.
You hear it from artists and from like all over. It's like you almost feel like I didn't write this. It was like almost like this was delivered to me.
Yeah,
right. It's just like this. Somehow these words just like these sounds, this song just like came out. And so I think my whole thing is you really just got to follow that and have faith that it will be good.
I couldn't have said it any better, man. Is there anything else that we didn't cover? Anything you want to get out there?
No, I mean that was that.
yeah, exactly. No, I think
I've been holding that in.
I think we did pretty good.
That was fun.
Sweet, man. Last question. I asked this at the end of all of them. You don't have to think about it too hard. Kind of the first thing that pops into your head. Just a time in your life, and it could be recently, it could be from when you were a kid, whenever, that in a moment, music really deeply affected you. And that could be, change the way you thought about something, or tied to an important moment, or just gave you goosebumps. Kind of the first thing that pops into your head. Doesn't have to be significant.
I talked about the Cascade thing, but one, I would say it's actually John Mayer in high school. In senior year, he came out with an album called Continuum, and that was the first piece of music that I think made me want to write music for a living.
Interesting.
Just from that's the album I learned every song on guitar. I learned how to play every single one. I remember all the lyrics. I've listened to that thing 1,000 times.
Right.
There's a Jimi Hendrix cover on it that sort of led me down the road of like into classic rock and Led Zeppelin. And so that was sort of that was probably the turning point for me. Yeah,
that's great, man. I love those albums or those songs that can kind of take it from beyond a fan perspective, where you want to engage on a deeper level. And I think all of us have had that kind of moment in some way.
Yeah, it's my whole motivation for being in music is I want to make something that makes people feel the way I felt about Continuum. So,
man, I love that. Well, man, this has been great. Thanks for taking the time and sitting down.
Of course, thanks. This was awesome.
Awesome, man. I'll talk to you later.
What's up?
Peace. All right, that's the show. Shout out to Elephante. Great to talk to you, man. For everybody out there, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Don't forget to go grab the Glass Mansion EP and all of the remixes that just dropped. As always, my name is Willy Joy. You can reach out to me. backtobackpod@gmail.com is the email address, or you can hit me up at Willy Joy or at backtobackpod on all social media. That's it for this week. We got some great episodes coming up before the end of the year, so stay tuned. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're gearing up for the holiday season. Until then, I'll talk to you next Tuesday. For Back to Back, this is Willy Joy. Peace.